I have to ask before we land this plane, because you mentioned working with people like Geraldo, and Mitch Hedberg was the one for me that
The best.
the best. Like Sinbad's the guy I saw on TV first,
Yeah.
and was just like first comic I ever saw on television, and I was like, oh, that looks fun, and he's just funky and having a good time, and he's clean, which I've always been. It just kind of what was naturally funny to me.
Me too.
But I like all comedy, but
Me too. I'm the same way.
it was, but Mitch Hedberg was the comedian. I think the first one I just listened to on repeat over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And did you get to work with him?
Oh yeah, I have the best Mitch stories. So to your point, Bill Cosby was the first one I ever saw, because my parents, I grew up in a very strict Southern Baptist home, so I did not have Lenny Bruce and George Carlin records on in the background. Like, we watched Bill Cosby himself, which ironically is even creepier somehow. Some Jeff Foxworthy tapes maybe in the car on the way to vacation. And then I would watch Evening at the Improv. That was that was the show that I would watch stand-up comedy on. And Wendy Liebman, Larry Miller, and Stephen Wright was like my guy. I love wordplay. I love puns. Stephen Wright, of all the ones I'd seen, was like, this is my dude. So fast forward, I'm doing stand-up. I'm doing IT. This is before I was full-time. And someone at my job brings me a Time magazine that had just done a special piece on Montreal. And they had gone over, Seinfeld had just gone off the air. And so the piece was about the new faces at Montreal, seeing, are any of these people the next Seinfeld? And it was like Horatio Sands. There was like a bunch of names that you would even recognize today. And the main star of the article was Mitch Hedberg. And someone was just like, here, this is about stand-up. You'd like it, And so I was like reading about it. And then the guy from Go Bananas called me into his office, and he says, I'm thinking about bringing this guy to the club. And he plays this clip of Mitch on Louis Anderson's like Comic Strip Live or whatever show that was. And I was like, this is like the modern day the modern day Stephen Wright.
Yeah.
Like, this is my guy. I was like, you have got to let me MC for this dude when he comes here. And so he did. And so he let me open for Mitch. And then I was booked the next week to MC in Dayton, which is like 45 minutes from Cincinnati. And that headliner canceled the week before. So the Dayton club called Go Bananas and said, would Mitch like to just stick around this part of the country and work our club next week? And he did. So I worked with Mitch 2 weeks back to back as his opener. And he was so fun to hang out with. He wanted to go to movies. We went bowling. And I was like, as soon as I got off work, I would drive up, and then we would go do something fun before the show. And so it went so well. This was probably like April or May of 99. And then that December, for New Year's Eve, they booked him again to headline New Year's Eve 99 to 2000. And I was an IT guy, so everybody was worried about Y2K.
Yeah.
So they gave me the week at the club, but I had to leave at midnight to go back to work just in case like the world's computers shut down or whatever.
Wow.
And so before I left, Mitch said, do you want to come open for me in North Dakota in February, in Grand Forks, North Dakota, at this old club called the Westward Ho? And he was like, I'm doing a special show on Valentine's Day. And I was like, absolutely. So I took vacation and I drove to North Dakota. And I did this show, Mitch Hedberg and Friends. And it was awesome. And he, on that trip, so that would have been, February of 2000, he's like, quit your job. And I'm like, I can't quit my job. And he's like, quit your job. Call your boss. This is like Saturday night at like 3 a.m. Call him right now. Tell him you're not coming in. I was like, Mitch, I can't. There's no chance that I can quit my job right now. He's like, you need to quit your job. And I was like, I can't do it. And so I went back home, and then we'd kind of stayed in touch. I would randomly take vacation days to go work with him on the road if he would call. And so when I decided to quit my job in early of 2001, I said, hey, I called my parents, and I called Mitch, and he was the second person I called, and I said, I'm quitting my job to do comedy full time. And he said, what's your last day? And I said, Friday, the 13th of July, 2001. And he goes, so what does that mean? The next week's your full time, your first week as a full time comic? And I said, yeah. And he said, what club have you always wanted to work that you've never worked? And I was like, well, there's a million of them. But at the time, the Laugh Stop in Houston was the club. It's where like Dane Cook and Louis C.K., like everybody was recording their albums in there. It was just kind of known as like one of the best.
Bill Hicks come up there?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yes, he did for sure.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what about the Laugh Stop in Houston? And he hung up and he called me back and he said, your first week as a full-time comic, you're featuring for me at the Laugh Stop in Houston. And I was like, what? So I went down there, and then almost once a month he would say, where are you trying to get into that you can't get into? And I would say, Atlanta. And so he was the reason that I got into Atlanta to the Punchline for the first time, was because he brought me here with him. And at the old club in the green room, everybody signed the wall. Mm-hmm. And that first time I was here, and I think I put the Punchline, this is why you become a comedian. And I wrote the first time that I was there, like the day, the month and the year. And then every time I came back, I would just add the month and the year to it. And so when they closed the old club down, I took a picture next to it, and there was like 17 dates or something of times that I had been here. But the first time was with Mitch. And I'll give you 2 quick stories. I know we're over time.
There's no, I mean, I know your wife had called you, but
she's fine.
Yeah,
we're talking about Mitch.
Dude, let him fly, man.
So one time when we were here, like when you work with Mitch a lot, you start to talk like him and you start to write like him. Like it's just weird. Like you can't help it. You get used to his cadence, because I would never miss a set. Like he's the best of all time. So
were his sets always different, or was he pretty scripted?
He was all over the place. You know, he had his book. I mean, it was so important to him because his jokes were so short, they were easy for people to memorize. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you can imagine what it would be like today in the social media world with Hedberg. Like, he would be a billionaire just on viral,
because just boom, boom, boom,
30-second clips of full jokes.
Not to derail your story.
No, but like it was sometimes it would be to his detriment that he wanted to have new stuff so bad, because people would yell out jokes that they want to hear.
Oh, wow.
And he'd be like, why do you want to hear that? You already know the answer to it. I'm gonna write new stuff, and then he would sort of not depression per se, but like he would become obsessed with how much the crowd was enjoying the show, and would be very hard on himself, and it was like everybody else is like, this guy's a genius, like just do whatever you want and people will be on board with it. But he was always so worried about what people thought. And so I was starting to write jokes that like just didn't make sense for my act, but they were kind of written in Mitch's voice. And I went to him and I was like, would you want any of these? I think they're funny, but like they just don't make sense if I do them. And he's like, they are funny, but you need to do them. And I'm like, they don't make sense if I do them. And I go, they're like your voice. He's like, you need to do them. And I'm like, well, just never mind then. So we're at the old Punchline, and he's on stage, and he goes, it's like halfway through his set. He goes, hey, Josh, you still in here? And I was at the back, and I was like, yeah, I'm here. He's like, y'all remember Josh, right? Well, he wrote jokes that are funny, but he don't want to do them. He wants me to do them. I'm going to make him come up here and do them. He's like, you want to hear the jokes Josh wrote for me? And everybody's like, yeah, you know. So I went on stage, and I was like, well, I wrote these jokes as Mitch. So if I'm going to do them, I need to do them as Mitch. So I like close my eyes, and I get, you know, right up on the microphone, but oh yeah. And everybody would start giggling, you know. And then I would do these like 4 or 5 like little punny, you know, Mitch style jokes, and they did really well. And then, you know, the few times after that I worked with him, that's what he would do. He'd bring me up and have me do the jokes I wrote for him. So you know, like he was so good to me and to so many people, but I never felt like there was anything I could do for him. Certainly not financially or within the business. Like there's no way I could repay him, you know? So I was walking around I think it was like the Perimeter Mall or something one day, killing time. And I came upon a Build-A-Bear shop, and they had koalas in there. And so I was like, can you like record your voice and like stick it in here? And they were like, yeah. And so I did all of Mitch's koala jokes as Mitch, you know, and like if you press the paw, you know, it'd be like, hey Mitch, feed me a leaf, you know. And so I gave it to him that night at the Punchline, and I was just like, this is just something dumb, just to say, you know, thank you for all that you've done for me. And then when his next album came out, Mitch All Together, there's a liner note that says, thank you, Josh Sneed, for Quacky. And so him and Lynn had named the koala bear Quacky, and they would take it on the road with them and, you know, have it order a bunch of room service. And they'd be like, who ordered all this food? Was it Quacky? You know? And so it was just a fun little, like, if anybody read that in those notes, they would have no idea what Quacky is, but it's a stuffed koala bear that talked like Mitch Hedberg that I gave to him.
Oh my God.
And I'll tell you this is my favorite Mitch thing. So when I was recording an album, it was actually the first thing I ever recorded pre-Comedy Central. It was literally just a homemade CD to have to sell on the road. I was opening for Ron White, and
oh yeah, you opened for all Blue Collar, tour, right? At one time, yeah.
So I was opening for Ron at a club. He had already started selling out theaters, but he had this club date booked and he wanted to honor it. So it sold out like 9 shows in 4 days. I mean, it was like insane. We did 3 shows on a Sunday.
Oh my.
That's how many tickets he sold. And so I was like, well, I'm going to record this week, you know, from the feature spot. I'll just do a bunch of different sets because I know that it's going to sound the same in the same club and that every show is going to be packed.
Yeah.
So I recorded all these sets, and the MC, rest in peace, his name was Ricky Pearden. He just passed away not long ago, but he had the thickest Southern accent you have ever heard. So I had all these sets that I was really happy with, but they all started with, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Josh Sneed. And I was like, I cannot have this dude like introducing me on my CD, right? So the next week I was in Nashville with Mitch, and he was like, how'd the recording go? And I was like, well, it was great except for the intro. And I told him what had happened. He goes, do you still got your recording stuff? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, I'll record it for you. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, go get it. So in the green room of the Nashville Comedy Club, Zany's, he recorded what was the intro for my first CD. And he says, hey everybody, it's Mitch Hedberg. Grab a drink, sit back, relax, and listen to the comedy of my favorite, Josh Sneed. And so that was the intro that led into my set. And then, of course, he passed before my Comedy Central album came out. And I just felt like I couldn't do it again without being able to ask him if it was still cool. You know, I think it would have been, but it just felt weird. So it just kind of made that first CD that much more special. But he recorded the intro to my first CD, and it's out there on like YouTube and stuff. And I've put the audio, like, you know, on the anniversary of like his passing or his birthday or something. Sometimes I'll just like write little stories about him, and I always share the audio from it. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I didn't even, because I think he died on April Fool's Day.
The day before.
So I heard about it on April Fool's Day, and And I was like, this has got to be a joke. This would be something Mitch would be like, yo, he dies on April Fool's Day. There's no way. Right. And then you're like, oh, no, it actually did.
Yeah. The last time I saw him, he was doing a Comedy Central tour with Stephen Lynch, who's like super funny comedian, musician. And our paths just happened to cross. I was out with the Blue Collar guys, and they were doing a show in Michigan at the same time. So I stopped by to just kind of hang out. Al Madrigal was the MC, who's like amazing, but he was like, you know, the MC that at that time not really anybody had heard of, and I was like fell in love with him immediately. So funny. But Mitch asked me to do a guest set. This was like February of 2004, I think. And he was like, you want to do some time? I was like, Mitch, this isn't like a late show Friday at the Punchline. Like, this is like a theater. Like, you don't do guest sets at theaters. He's like, you can do it in my show. So I did like 10 minutes on this theater show where I was just there to hang out, and not knowing that would be the last night that I saw him, because, you know, a couple months later he passed away. But that night I was doing a show in Lexington at the University of Kentucky, and on my way to the gig, my manager called and he said, hey, have you heard anything about Mitch? And I said, no, why? And he goes, well, the rumors going around that he passed away. And I was like, I haven't heard anything about that. And he goes, well, the club that he's supposed to be at this weekend is calling around trying to find another comedian. And I was like, oh man. I was like, no, I haven't heard anything, but I'll try to find out. And a woman that used to work here at the Punchline, she was real close with Mitch and Lynn, Kathy. And so I messaged her asking if she had heard anything, when I didn't hear back. And I go on stage at the school, and when I come off stage, I look at my cell phone, and there was 36 missed calls from, like, the word had gotten out and everybody had called to make sure that I had heard about it. But it was like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, I know what these are all about.
Yeah.
So I know, such a loss of a human, and as to the business, you know, just like, just people won't get to know like how cool he was and like what he did for completely unknown people like me, to just like help him out wherever he could. I mean, it's just like ridiculous. I have so many stories, but I hope they all get told by people someday.
I know. I had never heard that side of him. Like, I'd only heard just story. I think I heard Greg Warren tell a story of like a funny story of them at like a hotel, and him trying to pay cash. So like, funny. I've heard that side of it, of him, and like how he was off stage was like similar to on stage. He was kind of out there, but I haven't heard that side of him, like just how generous he actually was. Oh, you know,
I know someone's working on a documentary, and I know it'll get done, and it'll be like, people will be just amazed by his story, but I think they'll be even more amazed by just how many people like me have stories about just like cool stuff that he did not have to do, and knowing, especially at that time, you know, because social media wasn't a thing, you know, so it wasn't ever, these stories would get around so much quicker now, you know, but they just came from like a genuine good dude that loved the business and loved to see, you know, help out young comics.
And was he like the guy, like in the industry? Was he like at the top of the food chain at one point? Is that how big he got?
I mean, I think he was headed that way.
Yeah.
You know, he did a tour before the Stephen Lynch tour. He did a tour for Comedy Central. It was him, Dave Attell, and Louis Black. They were all on the same show together. And he was starting to, literally just starting to do theaters. And I just think that, I mean, if it was today, he would be the #1 comedian in the universe. I mean, he would sell out everywhere he went, just because the exposure that catapults people to that type of fame, he was built for that. He had the look, he had the jokes. I just remember I'm just being in awe, like in the back of the room, no matter where we were, every time. Just, I cannot wrap my head around the fact that someone would know a joke by heart and still want to hear him say it.
Yeah.
Like, it happens to me once a month, maybe, from somebody who has memorized something from Dry Bar. Like, we do the whatever bit, and then, like, this was every night where he would do an hour of brand new stuff, and then he would do a half hour of people just yelling out stuff they wanted to hear.
And they're just, it's not like Burt Machine Story that's 13, 20 minutes or whatever, but it's literally just like a one-liner. People are like, just say that, set up punchline.
Yes.
That's so cool.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
I appreciate you sharing that. I haven't heard anyone talk about that side of him before. So
Yeah.
it's very cool.
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of people got to see it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just unfortunate for so many reasons, but primarily just a loss of like this unicorn comedian human. It stinks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah,
Really
of course,
appreciate
man.
that.
I'll talk about those. I mean, like I said, I was Geraldo, Attell, Patrice. You know, I mean, Attell's still alive, but I just was so lucky to be
all
at
killers,
such an impressionable age and years in the business to be able to like literally learn from the best. Bill Burr, Gaffigan, Birbiglia.
What? All these people coming through that club?
Oh yeah.
You got to just,
Oh yeah.
oh my.
Oh yeah. It's wild. It's wild. And it's wild to like hear your reaction to that, because I remember being the young guy, and when people would say, oh yeah, I worked with Bill Hicks, or oh yeah, Sam Kinison used to come, like they would say these names, right? I'd be like, what? They worked the comedy club? Like, you know, and then now I'll just tell like a Mitch story, like, yeah, it was awesome. And then like other, you know, younger guys would be like, you met him?
I'm like, what? They're people? Wait a minute. They're comedians that do clubs?
Yeah.